Hello, everyone. This is Pastor Blake, and we're continuing our study of the book of Daniel in chapter 3. If you haven't read it, stop the video, just read it real quick, and then press play. So we see in chapter 2, Daniel was given the ability to have favor in front of the king. The king had a dream about a statue, and he didn't understand what it meant. And instead of just having his sorcerers and his enchanters, his people that he considered to be pretty wise, he actually told them, look, you need to tell me the dream and then interpret it. They said, no one can do that. I mean, no one can know stuff like that except for the gods. And luckily, Daniel was distressed. He was one of those people that could have been killed because no one was able to do this. He was in that kind of wise men circle at the time, or at least training to be. And God gave him the dream, though. God gave him the dream and also the interpretation. And so, in chapter 2, now we see Daniel kind of stepping away. We don't really see Daniel in here. We see the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego story take over of the fiery furnace. And so, but as we get into that, it's just interesting that, the enchanters, the sorcerers, couldn't do this for the king Nebuchadnezzar. But yet Daniel could, and you don't see him just changing his mind. And also, dreams were very significant in the ancient world, but yet you don't see the king actually changing his mind. You just see him, you know what, I like Daniel. Maybe he does know what's going on. And so we see that Daniel was given favor, but the king wasn't changed yet, at least. And so as we go into chapter 3, immediately, what's interesting, what happens, immediately Nebuchadnezzar makes a statue for himself. Now, could it be the one from the dream? Because, see, the one in the dream had gold as the head, and it was known as Babylon, his own kingdom, Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom. And then it has the kind of the midsection was silver, which was another kingdom that was to come by the interpretation. And then the lower part was bronze. So that was another kingdom. And then the feet was bronze mixed with clay, yet another kingdom. And so isn't it interesting, the first thing that Nebuchadnezzar does, or at least that we see recorded, is he makes his own statue. And what is the statue? Is it exactly like the dream? Has he accepted that his kingdom one day wouldn't actually be on the earth? No. He actually makes the entire symbolism in the dream of what his kingdom was, which was gold, and he makes the entire statue gold. So we see it could be that he made this statue to kind of almost show the God of Daniel, you know what, I'm going to live forever. My kingdom will be forever. Whatever he meant, it's interesting that the first thing he does is make a statue, but make it the only thing that was associated with his kingdom, which was gold, in his dream. And the dream was to show him that his kingdom won't last forever, but yet he's kind of making his own kingdom up, saying, you know what, my kingdom will last forever. Here's the statue of pure gold to prove it. It's interesting. I don't know, but it's interesting to think about. Now, this statue was big, though. It's said to be 60 cubits in height and then 6 cubits in breadth. Now, we do the conversions. Into our modern standards, about 90 feet tall and about 9 feet wide. So this is not a simple statue. This is a very big statue. So, obviously the next day, this probably didn't happen after the dream. This probably took a little bit of time to create and to make and to mold and everything. But he certainly set it up, and it seems to be something he enjoyed. Because he said, you know what, when I play the lute and the lyre and all the bagpipes, all the horns, any instrument, whenever you hear this, the whole kingdom, all languages, everyone that can hear it is to bow down to this statue. That's the statue. This is not no real thing. This is not something that came from heaven down. This is a statue that a man made, that he wanted his whole kingdom to bow down to worship. Now, a lot of the people of the ancient world were probably used to this, honestly. Now, we think it's very foolish, but you gotta think, this is an entire system of way people were back in the day. Okay, the ancients, whenever the king made a statue like this, and you wouldn't bow down to it, he talked about how you'll be ripped limb from limb. You'll be dead. All things will be destroyed of yours. But these people, they didn't put up a fuss. They just said, all right, and we bowed down. And you see how when they had the lute and the harp and everything, the horns, all of this was played. They just bowed down immediately. And you know what? Whenever a new kingdom would come along, people of the ancient world, a new set of gods would come up. They may not even serve the same God. But you know what? When this new God would come, they would be like, all right, well, he's the new thing that we have to worship on the block. So they would just bow down to it. So to the people, you don't see them really push back at all. I mean, now this is a king and this is powerful, he'll kill you, but you don't see any pushback. This is probably pretty normal for them. They've probably been in situations, and like the slaves that were in this kingdom, they probably came from other kingdoms that they served other gods. And then when they were brought in here, the captives, they just started serving whoever the king decided to serve at the moment. So this is probably not as weird as it seems to us, but to them, you know, this is just their daily life. There was not really freedom in these kingdoms. There wasn't this idea that, you know, we can all get along and we can all worship who we want to worship. This wasn't a thing back then. It was you serve whatever the king wanted you to serve. That was it. That's all your choice. That's all the things you had to decide in life. To try to find food, try to make the king happy. That was basically it. I mean, that's all these people were, that's all their lives were. And so, we go on. Now, you see, when the horns and the lutes and lyres and the bagpipes were playing, someone realized that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were not bowing down. They decided not to bow down. They wanted to serve the God of Israel. They wanted to serve the God that they had always served. They knew it was the one true God. And so what do we see? People running. Now, people were telling on Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They ran to the king, said, King, you said to do this. You said when the horns, bagpipes, lyres, lutes, when they were to play, you were to bow down. Everyone in your kingdom were to bow down. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they have not bowed down yet. And so you need to get them, okay? Now we see that the king calls them up. Say, hey, I told everyone to do this. You know you were supposed to do this, so why didn't you do it? And we see Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in front of the king. This is not like some, it's not like the mayor of a town. This is like the king of an empire, okay? And they tell him, they said, look, our God is able to save us. And if he doesn't, we still will not bow down to you. Now, that tells a lot about their faith because like David wasn't really expecting for a dream and an interpretation to come along. Now, I'm sure he was hoping for it, but he prayed for it. He even told Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in chapter 2 to pray that God would have mercy on them when the king wanted someone to know of this dream. And we see again, they weren't saying, our God will save us and we'll tell you how. They said, you know what? Our God is able to save us. We do know this for a fact. But even if he doesn't, we still will not serve. Now think about that in our job places and where you work and your family and where you places you go. You know, we have a lot of we have some pressure against us in this nation, but nothing like this. Not even close to this. They're going to literally kill these guys. And these guys don't know if God's going to save them. Think about how much faith these guys had in the God that they serve. Do you have that kind of faith? Can you stand up in front of people who are pushing against you or trying to tempt you or trying to bring you down, saying, you know what, my God is able to save me from the situation. But even if he doesn't, I will not serve. We have to be like that with God. We have to serve God with that kind of faith because we do know the Word of God tells us that God is all-powerful. He is the King of Kings. He pulls people up. He pulls people down. He is in control. But sometimes he doesn't allow certain things to happen, or he does allow certain things to happen. We can't know that about God, but no matter what does your faith do in those moments? Will you go ahead and serve him? Will you shy away a little bit? What will you do? Will you stand in front of the king and will you say, our God is able, but if he doesn't, we will not serve? That's powerful what they did. It's a powerful message and testimony to us. Now we go on and we see that he said, you know what? He was mad. He's like, no, this is not happening. I'm the king. They will serve or they will die. Heat the fire up. Heat the furnace 7 times more. And we see them. Now, what's the 7 times mean? Like, how do they even know how to stoke a fire 7 times? 7 in the Bible a lot of times has significance in perfection and completion. We know that it's the word kind of means that, and so it probably means that they just said he meant to stoke the fire as hot as you can get it. Just as hot as you can get it. Make the furnace as blazing as possible. Because you know what? Hey, maybe that... Because these guys were training up to be wise men, people of his kingdom. So, I mean, he may not have wanted just to kill them, but he may have wanted to say, you know what? If we stoke it, maybe they'll change. They'll feel the heat. They'll feel the intensity. And maybe by fear, we can get them to follow us. So what did they do? They did not follow. They didn't repent. They said, you know what? Do what you have to do. Our God is able, but if he does not, we will not serve him. And then all of a sudden you see men that bound them up. They were to throw the 3 guys in the fire. They were actually killed because of the intense heat. Now, how interesting is it that God can save 3 men in a furnace, but the king can't even save his men throwing those guys in the furnace. That's powerful. God, and how is it? Isn't it interesting how God does that a lot of times? Just like Pharaoh. You know, God hardened Pharaoh's even heart in Exodus, how he wouldn't just let the Hebrews go, but he showed a nation how powerful he was. And even in this moment, God is showing, even indirectly, maybe in a subconscious manner, Nebuchadnezzar saying, man, this God is saving these people I have condemned. Yet I can't even save my own men that I did not condemn. It's amazing how God works. But they were thrown into the fire. And the king himself, look at this. We know that 3 men were in there. But then all of a sudden, the king himself, no one else, the king noticed that there were 4 people standing in the furnace. And he said to the person, he said, hey, weren't there, he had another person come up, didn't we throw 3 guys in there? Like, am I losing it that bad? But he said, there's 4 people in there. And all 4 of them, they're just walking around. They're unbound even. And he said that one of them looks like the son of the gods. And you see a king that does not know the God of Israel, a king that does not know Jesus, does not know angels, doesn't know anything like that. He notices that this 4th person has something very different. He knows that there's something different about the 4th person standing with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now, if this is Jesus as a real physical manifestation of Jesus, I mean, it doesn't say Jesus, so we can't definitively say. It could have been an angel. God used angels in the Old Testament to do all kind of things. And so it could have been Jesus. It could have been an angel. We don't know. So we can only speculate that. But certainly there was something different about this other man. And the king himself, isn't it interesting how the king's kind of going through this motion? You know, he made the statue to represent his own kingdom never ending. He threw him in the furnace to show his power. His men died. And then all of a sudden the king is also the one that notices the 4th person. And he notices that there's a difference in this 4th person. So what does he say? What does he do? He calls the 3, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, come out of there. Come out of the furnace. And so they come out, and he realizes, and all the other people do too, that the fire hadn't affected them. It didn't affect their clothes. It didn't even singe the hairs on their arms. They didn't even smell like fire. I mean, you'd be around a campfire for 5 minutes and you smell like one. But yet, somehow God, now I don't know how. I have no idea. He put like a bubble of God glory on them. I don't know. We have no concept. But God somehow, miraculously, did something in his own creation. His sovereignty overpowered what fire does, what he created. And his sovereignty said, you know what? These people will be saved. And he allowed for none of their hairs to be singed, none of their clothes to be hurt, none of their smell, the scent from them. The scent was fine, didn't smell like a fire at all. And God was able to save them. And this king saw it. The people around them saw it. This is a significant moment because, I mean, the dream was interesting. But the dream was only in the king's head. All the other people couldn't see the dream happening. It was just what the king was going off of. And I mean, goodness, the king set up a statue for them to worship. I mean, people were just living their lives. But this time, it wasn't in the king's head. People could see that these men had something different about them. That when you were thrown into a furnace, the people who bound them died. But yet these people who were inside of the furnace themselves were unharmed. This was something more significant than a statue of gold just standing there. This was something real and powerful that was happening right in front of their eyes. That, I mean, I don't know if they could explain it. But we see that they weren't affected. And the king made a decree at that moment. He said, you know what? This is beyond me. He said, anyone, I make a decree, anyone that speaks against their God will be torn limb from limb and their house is burnt down. He has a problem with tearing people apart. But he made a decree in verse 29, any people, nation that speaks anything against the God, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses laid in ruins. For there is no God. Now he's met this. This is the king making this declaration. Okay, the king. There is no God who is able to rescue in this way. He realized he's like everything he knows, everything he's been taught, all the literature, all the wise men, all the sorcerers, all the enchanters. He said, "There's no God who can rescue in this way. There's none." And what does he do? And they were promoted in the land. You see, through the book of Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar had a lot of things going on, but you see how God's sovereignty, how God sometimes just steps into his own creation to change up. You know, fire destroys, but in this moment, he didn't let it destroy. Fire creates a smell, creates singes. It has this effect, but yet God allowed it to not happen. Nebuchadnezzar was probably just being wrecked at this moment. He couldn't understand what is with this, and he finally made the statement, there is no God who could rescue in this way. And then he makes a decree. Nebuchadnezzar's having a lot of things going on in his life. We see Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and Daniel. Amazing story. Tune in next week, next Wednesday, for chapter 4.